Welcome. Last night we had an amazing success in broadcasting, live streaming from the middle of Parliament House in Australia with Tony Heller and Tim Ball, Professor Tim Ball. What an amazing success.
Oh, it was great. It was fantastic. I feel honored that you invited me to come down here and be a part of this. And I felt like our discussion last night between the three of us, we worked together extremely well. And I think we got our message across.
Well, we certainly did. For a discussion on science, a 2-hour discussion on science, mate, this is what we got. 72,000 people reached, more than 1,000 people reacted, and this is 12 hours later.
Yeah.
We've been viewed by more than 20,000 people, and we've had comments from more than 1,000 people already.
Yeah.
2 hours on science.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who are interested in keeping their energy costs low and protecting our energy security. And you're their champion, so I'm not surprised.
And it's wonderful to have you over because you didn't agree with everything, and that's what science is all about. It's about an open debate.
Yeah, exactly. I grew up in a scientific community, and I remember, my father would take me to colloquiums over at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Los Alamos?
Yeah,
wow.
on Tuesday. And the scientists would get in these very heated, angry, art discussions and arguments about things. And that's how science was always done.
Yep.
It was amazing. Sometimes it was a little bit frightening watching this, but this is the only way that you're going to get science accomplished. And that's exactly what's wrong with the climate debate. One side, they were losing the debate, so they just cut us off. And they say the debate's over, we're done, which essentially means, to me, that means they've lost and they just want us to shut up because they have an agenda they want to push through.
And it's important to grab you today, and you've already got a luncheon engagement. You've been invited to address a group of people at lunch here in Canberra, nation's capital. Tim has already headed off to Melbourne to address to present the inaugural Bob Carter Memorial Lecture in Melbourne. You're both getting together again Thursday night in Sydney to address a group in Sydney. We're hoping to get you back here in Canberra, the nation's capital, for some lunches with some important groups, hopefully even the CSIRO. And then you fly back on Sunday. So we made a promise last night that we would ask you and Tim the questions that were left over that couldn't be addressed last night. So let's start because we haven't got much time before you have to go off for lunch. This is from Darren Yarrow. Hi, is it true that CO2 levels are at present at some of the lowest levels ever in the Earth's history? You're a geologist, you'd know this one. And that some of the previous ice ages had higher CO2 levels than we have had today. Also, does the sun drive climate, not carbon dioxide driving climate? My understanding, the Earth's orbit around the sun is elliptical and varies considerably from time to time. Would this changing distance from the sun also have an effect, and is it being considered?
Those are all extremely good questions, and it's absolutely right. The CO2 levels in the Earth right now, about 400 parts per million, are just about the lowest they've ever been in Earth's history. During the Cambrian era, when corals and shellfish evolved, CO2 levels were 10 to 20x higher than they are now. So we always hear this nonsense about ocean acidification. The corals are going to die from higher CO2 levels, but corals evolved with CO2 levels 10 to 20x higher than they are
in a warmer period than today.
Much warmer, right. It was 10 degrees centigrade warmer, and the corals thrived in that environment. So it's utter nonsense from a geological point of view. As far as the ice age goes, yes, in the late Ordovician, there was an ice age which occurred with CO2 levels about 10 times higher than they are now. Almost the entire landmass of the Earth was covered with ice at that time.
Yeah.
And certainly as far as solar activity goes, there's a very strong historical correlation between very low periods of solar activity and cold. The English astronomer William Herschel made a correlation, a graph between grain prices in Europe and solar activity, and showed there was a very close correlation. During times like in the Maunder minimum, when solar activity was very low, temperatures were very low too.
Yeah. How does it feel to be part of the first live stream Facebook, Twitter broadcast from Australia's Parliament House?
Well, it's absolutely wonderful, and it's been just one part of an amazing Australia experience. I'm a big lover of nature and wildlife photographer, and I've just been having a blast down here up in the bush yesterday taking pictures. All kinds of animals I've never seen outside of a zoo before, and some I've never seen in a zoo. So.
And this place is a bit of a zoo at times,
Oh,
isn't
yeah.
it? You were talking about 400 parts per million. I just thought I'd throw in a comment, as you know,
Yeah.
that is 0.04%. 4/100ths of 1%.
Right.
And that's, I wonder why, and that's the more scientific way of discussing it. 0.04% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, whereas the IPCC and a lot of the alarmists tend to splash around 400 parts per million. Wow, that's high, isn't it? It's 0.04%.
What I like to say is over the past century, would say the increase has been about 100 parts per million, and that is equivalent to the football stadium in Barcelona, Nou Camp, holds about 100,000 people. That's the equivalent to packing an extra 10 people into the stadium. Doesn't sound very frightening. It's less than the whole football team.
And nature's variation annually far exceeds our total production from humans.
Right.
It's just another question, Tony, from Natasha Lepornik. Mr. Heller, how can we trust you on your climate change claims when you have placed claims about the place of birth of the President of the United States and the denial that the Sandy Hook massacre occurred?
Yeah, I get this kind of nonsense from time to time. They just want to distract from the discussion. So what I did was I've traced through the history of birtherism. There's a very well documented history out on the internet. Anybody can see it. Going back to 1990, people very close to Barack Obama were promoting him as being born in Kenya. His literary agents, Acton, Distel, and Goderich, did this. They did this all the way through until 2 weeks before he announced his candidacy in April of 2007. I have no idea where Obama was born. I don't care. But there's a story there. I'd like to know why were Acton, Distel, and Goderich, who've never denied this, promoting him as born in Kenya. And I think the American public has a right to know. There's a tremendous amount of things I don't like about Barack Obama, a tremendous amount of problems with him, but I couldn't care less where he was born, and it's absolutely ridiculous. As far as the Sandy Hook thing goes, I used to work in Sandy Hook. I used to ride my bicycle past that elementary school where that tragedy occurred every day. And I know a lot of facts about it. I know people who live there. And there's a number of inconsistencies in the story and things that change. And once again, as an American citizen, I feel like I have the right to have those questions answered. Everybody has the right to ask those questions.
In the American Declaration of Independence, it's expected to question government.
Right. And what's very strange for me is prior to Obama being elected, I live in a very liberal town, Boulder, Colorado. Everybody had these question authority, bumper stickers on their cars. As soon as Obama got elected, now it's like it's illegal to question authority. It's just ridiculous.
Well, it's also amazing, as you pointed out, though, it shows that they don't have the evidence because they can't argue with you and can't debate your science. So what they try and do is discredit you. And then they try and make out that you're the one creating these things, and all you're doing is saying, look, these are supporters of President and close associates of President Barack Obama who are saying these things. Let's have a conversation about it. That's all you're saying.
Yeah.
And they're discrediting, they're trying to discredit you by saying, linking you as if you initiated that, and all you're doing is saying this is what other people have said.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a researcher, I'm an investigator. I like to study history and find out what's going on. When I started hearing about this birther thing, I started investigating and said, well, there's something really weird going on here, and I think American people have a right to know what it is. Now, I don't know where he was born. I don't care where he was born. That's not the point.
I love and admire people who question.
Yeah.
From Twitter, Forbes Mailer has stated that coal waste is more toxic than nuclear waste. Is this true?
No. As a matter of fact, I worked on the safety analysis report for the Department of Energy's nuclear waste disposal site in southeastern New Mexico. And I can assure you that nuclear waste is extremely hazardous. And I actually have some horror stories about that. At one time, a boss came in and said to me, an Indian guy, he says, "You guys are doing very, very good work here. Excellent work. Really proud of the work here. But whatever you do, don't find anything wrong with the project." So I just walked out of there, quit, and said, "I'm done."
Well, I can tell Forbes Mailer that coal waste is not toxic, unless you maybe had a belly full of it deliberately. But I can't see anyone eating coal waste. Coal waste is basically shale or sandstone. That's all it is, and you can get it off rocks around it, get it off the soil. I mean, this is insane.
Yeah. So where I live, in Boulder, Colorado, and I used to live in Fort Collins, Colorado. Both cities are powered by coal-fired power plants. Incredibly clean plants. You never see any kind of pollution coming out of it. And I would wager that 90% of the people who live there who probably all are against coal and hate it, they're not even aware that those coal plants are there.
I can remember, mate, back in 1981, I was driving towards LA after traveling through all 50 states. And I remember this guy, he was an environmentalist at the time. He came, and you and I share a love of the environment, protecting the environment. And he said, we've got to stop burning more coal and oil and use more electricity. I mean, what?
Yeah, I know. It's like, what do they think they're charging their Tesla with anyway? They do plug in their Tesla, it's connected to the coal-fired power plant.
And the Tesla uses far more of Earth's resources
Right.
than a normal car.
Yeah.
Jeff Cutts asked, is there any strength to the story that our present high temperatures are due to abnormal sunspot activity or the proximity of the sun to Nibiru? First of all, are our temperatures abnormally high currently?
I'm not really an expert on this. I know that there was a lot of warming prior to 1940, and there were a lot of people who believed at the time. And I've read a number of articles, believed at the time it was due to an increase in solar activity, but that's definitely not an area of my expertise.
So you're not making any claims about the sun being the driver of it, but certainly today's temperatures are not unusually warm, and past temperatures have been warmer and far warmer than today.
Yeah, certainly. I've know a lot about. I've studied the U.S. temperature record quite a bit, and I don't think there's any question that the United States was much hotter during the 1930s than it is now.
And had far longer droughts in the past.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Than the California drought now.
Yeah, right. California has had, tree ring data shows that California's had droughts that were 200 years long in the past.
I remember reading one when we were visiting a Hopi town. Was that in Arizona? I think northern Arizona, and they told us that there'd been a past drought, thousands of years ago, not hundreds of, not even tens of thousands of years ago, during the Holocene,
Right.
that was 1,000 years long.
Yeah, I can believe. Yeah, so, and what the problem with California's had is that the last century was the wettest century in California's history. So a lot of people moved there and they started using a lot of water, and they thought it was always going to be like that, and they get back into a more normal drought situation. In California, drought is normal in California. Then they go into panic. And they have the same governor now they had in 1977, Jerry Brown. They had a terrible drought in 1977, and he was going to do all these great things, build desalination plants, and do that. Then it started flooding again in 1980, and he forgot about all it. And now he's back, it's global warming.
Do you think that there could be a causation there between Democrat governor and drought?
Yeah, it seems to looks that way. But the interesting was the 1977 drought was blamed on global cooling, and the current drought is blamed on global warming.
And global cooling in the 70s was blamed on the same thing global warming is blamed on now, coal and oil.
Right.
Yeah, okay, got to get our wallets, haven't they?
Yeah.
John Levitt asks, what are their views on the solar cycles and Piers Corbyn? Well, you've already answered the first one. Do you know Piers Corbyn?
I do. Yeah, Piers
Any
is
views?
a good guy. Jeremy Corbyn's brother.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he's a very good guy. He's got some interesting theories.
Yeah. His work, from what I understand, has got a lot of credibility, but I haven't investigated it. And my understanding is that his success record on forecasts is way, way higher than the UK Met Office, way higher.
Well, that wouldn't be difficult.
because they're doctoring it. Piers makes a living out of making weather forecasts, and people come to him when they want the advice for making plans for their businesses.
Right.
Yeah, that tells everything I need to know.
Yeah, I'm going to be over in London presenting in a couple of weeks, and I'll try to hook up with Piers.
Yeah. I'm just checking with the clock. I'm not trying to hurry you up.
Right.
I know you've got to go to lunch, make your luncheon address.
Right.
John, Matt Wizik, how is a coal mine killing the Great Barrier Reef?
Well, I don't believe that it is. I think someone was saying yesterday that the Great Barrier Reef is in much better shape than it's been in years.
Yeah, I've got a letter to that effect from Professor Peter Ridd from James Cook University in North Queensland. And I also know from marine biologist, very good marine biologist, an American, Walter Stark. And tour operators you read regularly in the media are telling us that it's in better shape than it's been for a long time.
Right.
And it's interesting, Tony, the Barrier Reef is broken into three sections: a northern section, the central section, and a southern section. And if it was global warming, all sections would be wrecked, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But it's only a small section
Right.
of the northern section that is suffering a bleaching. In 2008, the southern portion of the southern section was bleached due to record cold temperatures. And coral and algae is a symbiotic relationship. And if the temperature reaches an extreme, it's designed to actually bleach and then restore itself. And the barrier reef is just going through a normal process. So if we have a warm temperature period with low wind and it settles on that particular area of the reef, then it bleaches if it's extraordinarily hot. But you know, at any one day you can go, and we used to be able to click on a CSIRO map of Australia and click on the water at the northern barrier reef and the southern barrier reef, and there's 4 to 5 degree temperature difference every day.
Oh, right.
And the reef up in, with similar species up in Thailand, is 2 degrees warmer than the northern barrier reef. I mean,
Right, and the thing about coral is they live in warm water.
they love it.
And if the global warming and expansion of the tropics was actually occurring, what that would do would be increase the range of corals. We would have more corals, not less.
And people forget that the barrier reef is only thousands of years old. It's not tens of thousands of years old. Yeah.
I wish I had time to see it.
Yeah, oh, it's beautiful. David Manning asks, why haven't any of our elected officials until now done their due diligence and questioned this science and where it comes from and the damage it is causing to our country and the economy? Are they all bought and paid for? Why hasn't Agenda 21 been scrutinised? Why is our media so hostile to people that want to have civilised debate and ask questions and get answers?
Well, I think it's very much what I was discussing last night, that my theme was the emperor's new clothes. People feel like, you know, they've been bombarded with 97% of scientists believe this, and most politicians, you're a very rare politician, and because of your engineering background, who has the self-confidence to take on this sort of nonsense. You know, they've been very effective with the propaganda and trying to propagate this belief that all scientists believe that, which is utter nonsense to begin with. But how would an ordinary politician who doesn't really have a strong background in science or engineering feel like they were qualified to come up against this?
Yeah, and what alerted me to this was that I have statutory qualifications in underground mining, and that requires knowing atmospheric gases. I mean, we get questioned on it rigorously. Oral exams, so it's not just written exams, and from our peers, oral exams from our peers and our superiors. And so when I first started hearing these things, I thought, this is rubbish. And sure enough, it was. It is.
Yeah, I did. You know, I used to work for large microprocessor companies like Intel, and my job was to make sure that before the chip went out to the fab, it was perfect, because they can't, you know, cost them tens of millions of dollars to have an error in it. So I had to assume that every single of these top engineers I was working with was wrong until proven otherwise. And that's the same approach I've taken with the climate stuff. I don't care what their credentials are. I look at their work and I look at it and I say, this work is garbage. And I've seen that over and over and over again with the climate work. In fact, I can't believe that these people are even employed. A lot of these studies are so horrible, you know, the methodology they're using.
And one of the things that has struck me, it hasn't surprised me, because we can't be experts on everything.
Right.
So there are some very, very eminent scientists who are coming out over the last few years and saying, you know, I just swallowed this. I assumed thousands of scientists had looked at this, so I assumed they were right, and then I started speaking out on the climate change themselves. This is them talking, and then a couple of times hang on, something doesn't make sense. They've gone into it, and they've been alarmed at how ridiculous the whole claim is, and they've come out and said, hey, I no longer support this nonsense. And so even eminent people, highly qualified people, have been sucked in and endorsed, but they have the knowledge to actually dig their way out. Most people in the public haven't got that knowledge.
Right.
You know, my wife had a very serious operation 6 years ago, and the surgeon we entrusted her life with, very good surgeon, very competent. Now, surgeons, as a matter of being part of their undergraduate, part of their medical degree, are taught about respiration, and they're taught how much carbon dioxide is in the air and how much is in the air we exhale. And so we said to Christine, my wife's surgeon, can you tell us how much carbon dioxide is in the air? And she's thinking, well, there's a lot of it shown on TV, and I think from memory it's 21% oxygen. I said, come on, what is it? 20%? And she was taught this, and she's a surgeon.
Right.
And she's a very competent, intelligent, honest person. And it's 0.04%. Right. Stunning, you know, even experts. Edwards Vincente, if carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increasing and causing global climate change, and since the combustion of carbon requires oxygen, Has the 21% of oxygen in air changed?
Well, it would be if there was such a change, it would be an extremely small change because, like you said, the percentage of carbon dioxide is so small. And plants absorb carbon dioxide and emit oxygen. And we've seen a graining of the earth. The increase in carbon dioxide has caused plants to grow faster, which is good for everyone. It feeds people, it keeps food cheaper.
Produces more oxygen?
Right, and they produce more oxygen. And
Yep.
the plants are happy and the people are happy. And then we have, and poor people are able to feed their families, they're
Yeah.
able to keep them warm, and these are the things we're fighting for.
Yep.
These elitists, what they're fighting for, Barack Obama said he was going to make electricity prices skyrocket by bankrupting the coal industry. And what kind of humanitarian who does that hurt? That doesn't hurt his rich friends, it hurts the poor people.
Speaking of Barack Obama's rich friends,
Yeah.
George Soros,
Yeah.
very influential in the Democratic Party, some other billionaires, they've been out there spruiking the so-called damaging effects of carbon dioxide from coal, talking down the price of coal stocks, coal shares. And Peabody Coal Company, or Energy Company as it's called now, its shares fell from 2011, they were about $1,100. They're now, or they were recently, $15. So they've fallen 98.5%.
Yeah.
They're at 1.5% of what they used to be.
Yeah.
Guess who bought into Peabody Energy Company?
Soros.
Soros.
Yeah.
Guess who bought into other coal companies?
Yeah.
The same billionaire mates.
Yeah, and the same thing like with the sea level, right? What they do is they scare people about sea level. It causes municipalities to force people out of their homes near the sea, and they come and buy up the oceanfront property.
That's
for cheap.
actually happened in Florida
Right.
and other places.
Yeah.
I think Carolinas too. John Beatty asks, can they tell me why the seashells and fossils are embedded in the cliffs up the Murray River north of Mannum and about 300 foot above current sea levels, please? As a geologist?
Well, the seas move up and down, the land moves up and down. Most of those sort of things are due to tectonic uplift of the land. Just, Darwin found seashells up in the Andes. So that was because the mountains were pushed up.
Okay, we've got hopefully two more. These were actually live last night and handwritten by our members of our team. From Adam Warhurst, what does NASA have to gain by altering temperatures?
Well, what they have to gain is funding. NASA is essentially contractors, and they work for the White House, right? If the White House wants them to produce global warming, they're going to produce global warming. If the White House wanted them to produce global cooling, I guarantee you they would produce global cooling. And it would be very easy to do because places like the United States, if you look at the raw data, it's clearly cooled since the 1930s. The Arctic is not as warm as it was in 1940. It'd be very easy to make a case for global cooling.
Yeah, and it's not the whole of NASA, because as you pointed out last night, there are many senior people in NASA, former astronauts, engineers, scientists from NASA, administrators, who have written to NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies and said, hey, you guys stop discrediting NASA's fine name. The other thing is it's not all of NASA, it's just the Goddard Institute of Space Studies, and it's not the entire Goddard Institute of Space Studies within NASA, it's basically a handful of people, not much more than that.
Right, exactly. And these people, who are upset about it, these are the people who they made the movie The Right Stuff about. These were the Right Stuff Apollo team, the ones who got us to the moon and back a number of times with a computer that's nowhere near as powerful as a cell phone.
Yep. One last question. We might actually make it in time. From Facebook, Vivi Mack. I would like to ask whether the effects of volcanic ash or sunspot variation are ever taken into account in the official global warming gospel. Clearly these things affect our climate.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point because when we had eruptions of El Chichon in the 1980s and Mount Pinatubo in the 90s, and both of those caused temperatures to be depressed quite a bit. And so they're more than happy to try to compensate for that and say, oh yeah, well, some of the global warming was, masked by these sort of events. But when it goes the other way, they don't mention it. So they're happy to discuss volcanoes when it works in their favor, but not the other way around.
Yeah, and you met one of our scientific advisors here the other day, Peter Bobroff,
Right.
and he's gone through the data, and he said sometimes you can't even see the volcanic activity on the overall trend of carbon dioxide. And in 2009, the the amount of hydrocarbon fuels used, that's coal, oxygen, oil and natural gas, actually decreased. And that meant we produced less carbon dioxide from human activity, yet that can't be seen in the overall trend, which continued increasing. And what that tells me is it confirms all the other data that shows human production of carbon dioxide cannot affect the level in the atmosphere. Nature controls that entirely, and we know that from very sound natural processes. But it also means that if they tax us to cut our use, it'll have no impact whatsoever on the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But the other thing we also know from empirical data is that the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere doesn't determine the temperature. Sometimes it's negatively correlated, and other times the temperature changes before the carbon dioxide changes.
Right. The first thing that they teach you in physical geology is that the solubility of carbon dioxide in seawater varies with the temperature.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we get coral reefs, why we get limestones forming, because when the temperature goes up in warm water, there's lower CO2 solubility. It outgasses the CO2 in the limestone form. So yes, every geology student knows this, is that when the temperature goes up, then the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere goes up. It's just most fundamental geological science.
Yeah. And then we also hear the term ocean acidity. I can't resist this. Ocean acidity. You've heard of Ian Plimer, the geologist in Australia, a very well credentialed, won international awards. For a start, it's not the oceans are not acidic; they're alkaline.
Right.
And secondly, the alkalinity level is not increasing; it's varying naturally, as it always has. And the alkalinity levels are not determined by carbon dioxide; they're determined by basal rocks, according to Ian Plimer. Do you want to make any comment?
Yeah. Well, so I'll make a political comment. So the ocean acidification thing plays a very important political role within the climate institutions, because I know climate scientists who are not particularly hot on the climate models or the whole theories, but they've told me this, they convince themselves that it's still worth doing what they're doing because of ocean acidification. Even if the global warming thing is completely overblown and not a serious problem, we're still saving the planet by reducing ocean acidification, which they don't know anything about. So it's a political ruse. It's used to help keep them in line.
So they get more money.
Yep.
They keep getting their grants. But the bottom line is ocean alkalinity, it's not acidity.
Right.
Alkalinity is entirely normal, just varying naturally.
Well, yeah, well, the oceans are filled with limestone, which is buffers the carbon dioxide. If carbon dioxide goes up, you get more limestone forming. It's a buffered system. Buffered chemical systems have been understood for a very long time. Unfortunately, climate scientists don't seem to have a lot of science in their background. However, there is one very good one, a couple of very good ones, the University of Colorado, Roger Pielke and Roger Pielke Jr. And just before we started, I saw a tweet from Roger Pielke Jr. saying that tornadoes in the U.S. this year are likely to be the lowest on record in the United States. And this has been like the past, actually we've had about 4 or 5 of the lowest years on record recently. Hurricanes have been the lowest on record. We had all these forecasts in the United States. Hurricanes are going to go up, tornadoes are going to go up, hot days are going to go up. All 3 of those have plummeted. The frequency of very warm days, like 40 degrees centigrade days in the United States, has plummeted over the last 90 years. This year was one of the lowest on record. Our hurricanes are at a record low right now. Tornadoes are at a record low. All these predictions that were made about extreme weather and extreme heat and drought, they're not coming true. The United States is about as wet as it's ever been right now. There was a great scene at the Democratic convention. They had Sigourney Weaver, who's one of my favorite actresses. I love her.
A great scientist, too.
Great. And she gets out there, she's talking about the drought in Texas. People, all these ranchers in Texas are suffering right now. Their cattle don't have any grass to eat. Texas has just had their wettest 2-year period on record. West Texas is just lush green like it's never. What is she talking about? And then there's a couple hundred delegates from Texas sitting there in the audience. I don't know if they just live in cities. Don't get. It's like none of them just stood up and said, "Shut up! You're just making up a bunch of nonsense."
Well, thank you very much. We're actually 5 minutes late for you to get to that luncheon engagement. I'm sure that they won't mind. The most important message is, though, that we're trying to restore scientific integrity because science has given us so much, and it's the basis of our civilization's improvements, which are highly beneficial for the environment, highly beneficial for humans, and highly beneficial for a civilization. That's it.
Great.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
down,
It's a
and
pleasure.
we look forward to helping you and for you helping us.
Great. Thank you.